Thank you for listening to the ThePPod from the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership. Please note, due to the nature of this podcast, themes relating to the abuse and neglect of children are discussed, with the content being designed for an adult audience for educational purposes in order to protect children from harm. Therefore, listener discretion is advised and the content unsuitable for children.
Welcome to the ThePPod.
Right then, welcome back to the ThePPod, the partnership podcast from the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership. Now today, I'm really pleased to be joined in the studio by my colleagues within the business unit, where we decided actually it was really important that we spend a bit of time talking about something that is part of our sort of core business as a business unit. I suppose it's the only part of a strategic body where the business unit gets quite operational in terms of supporting operational practice. And it's a really important area that everybody is aware of because we see it as a theme coming up time and time again, particularly in terms of reviews, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And so today's topic, we're going to be picking up on the subject of resolving professional differences. In other words, what do you need to do? What can you do if you have a safeguarding concern about a child and you feel that action is being taken or isn't being taken effectively to safeguard that child? So resolving professional differences is the topic today, and I'm really pleased to be joined by my colleagues Jasmine. Morning, Jasmine. Good to see you back here again.
Hi, Steve. Good morning.
Thank you, Jasmine. So for those of you who listened to previous episodes, you'll know that Jasmine is the business manager of the business unit of the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership. And I'm also joined today for the first time by Nicole. So good morning, Nicole.
Good morning. I'm very pleased to be making my first appearance on the podcast.
It's good to have you here. So, Nicole, because we haven't met you before here at the ThePPod, can you just spend a moment sort of explaining your role and what that entails?
So I am the project support officer for the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership. I am involved in a lot of the kind of administrative tasks. And in terms of the RPD, then I support with the running through the process, making sure that it's all being dealt with smoothly and that the referrer and the manager are getting a timely response.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nicole. So let's start off. And if people haven't heard about resolving professional differences protocol before, Jasmine, could you just sort of tell us what is it? What is an RPD?
Okay, well, I think it's first really interesting to note the name. So in Somerset, we call it the Resolving Professional Differences process. Previously, or in other areas, you might come across it as the escalation process. The reason why we call it Resolving Professional Differences in Somerset is because we're wanting that to be a more strengths-based process rather than kind of being a combative process. So we think that name reflects the ethos of the process better. And what it is the process that you follow if you disagree with an element of the plan that is in place for a child relating to safeguarding.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think it's important for people to be aware of the protocol because, and I think something that I always stress to people is in terms of the Resolving Professional Differences protocol, it is a partnership document, which means that it has been pulled together, it's been discussed, it's been agreed by all of the multi-agency partners to say this is how we agree that we are going to work together if we have a difference of opinion in any way. And I think that's just important to stress right at the start because sometimes people see the partnership resources as being local authority, for example, and it's absolutely not, is it? It's about everybody coming together to say this is how we are going to work together.
Absolutely. And the sign of a strong partnership is being able to work together to build and develop, but also to come together and resolve issues quickly. And the Resolving Professional Differences process is part of that.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of my sort of favourite key phrases that one of the authors of one of our previous child safeguarding practice reviews said that the sign of a mature partnership is one that can challenge without defensiveness. And I think they're absolutely spot on. And I keep coming back to that all the time. And because that's what it's about, isn't it? It's about that sort of open invitation from all partners to say, we are wanting to get this right. And actually, if part of that means we need to challenge each other, then that's what we need to do in order to make sure that we're focusing on the needs of the child or young person within all this process here.
Yeah, absolutely. And embodying all of the kind of principles of our partnership about taking that respectful approach and open communication. And it is interesting that you note that this was referenced by a author of a child safeguarding practice review in Somerset, because this is something that comes up in learning reviews, both locally and nationally, in terms of when we come together as, multi-agency teams around the child, and everyone has a different perspective on that child based on the kind of their knowledge, their area of expertise, their legal framework. There are going to be times where agencies have different perspectives about the right way forward for that child or that family. And when this does come through learning reviews locally, often it's about circumstances where an agency did disagree with the decision for a child. So it might be the decision to end a child in need plan, for instance, but missed the opportunity to really follow that process and to have those conversations between agencies to try and understand each other's perspectives and why that decision was made.
Brilliant. I think for me, the Resolving Professional Differences protocol and the process is interesting. You mentioned there, you kind of touched on the theme around communication, and I'm sure we'll come back to that throughout this episode, because for me, that underpins all of this. And I know with various bits of training that I do with different colleagues from different agencies, I think universally they'll say, look, sometimes there's an assumption we know stuff, and actually that might not have been communicated to us, or it might have been put on paper, but that's not translated. Or we've just had that different perspective, like you say, and actually sometimes just having those conversations to really sort of iron out, oh, okay, I understand now, in whatever way that is. I understand what the situation is, and actually this is how we can work together to improve things moving forward. So, Nicole, I think I was quite keen today for people to understand actually the process around resolving professional differences, because often people will fill out the resolving professional differences form and sort of submit that and send that off. And obviously the first point of contact with that is yourself. So I thought it might be useful just to kind of talk through, if you can, sort of what happens from the point that somebody clicks send on that email and it sends off the protocol to us, the resolving professional differences form. What happens when that comes into the main mailbox?
Okay, so in terms of that, I think it's quite important to note the stages that happen before it would be sent into the business unit. So first of all, stage 1 is the early resolution, which involves contact between the two frontline practitioners to discuss the concerns. So that would be the first step. And if it wasn't able to be resolved at that level, then it would be stepped up to stage 2, which involves informal resolution, which is contact between practitioner A and practitioner B's team manager to highlight the issue requiring resolution and outlining the desired outcome for the child or children. When it would be referred into the business unit would be at stage 3, which is the formal resolution procedure. So at this point,
Go on, you're right.
Would it be the team manager who would fill in? Okay. Sorry.
No, you're right. You're good. Do you want to go back a little bit? So talk about step 3 that will come into the business unit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then at stage 3, this is the formal resolution procedure, and this would involve the RPD form being filled in and submitted to the business unit by the relevant person from the agency concerned. So once this has been received, then it would be reviewed and we would agree as a team how to proceed. So in terms of what we would be looking for, we would be looking for proof that stage 1 and 2 have been followed. And once we've kind of understood that the concerns are relating to the safeguarding of a child or children rather than in the realm of a complaint, then I would discuss with Steve and Jasmine to agree the next steps ahead of sharing with the appropriate manager for oversight and resolution. So at this point, we would give 5 working days for the concerned agency to respond to the RPD that has been submitted. And we would also go back to the referrer just to acknowledge that this has been received and that we have progressed it to the stage 3 RPD to ensure that they are cited on the response. At this point, we would also make a log of it on our RPD log. And once that has been done, then I will add a note into my calendar to make sure that if a response hasn't been received within the time constraints, that we are following up on a daily basis to make sure that we are receiving a response and that the referrer is content with that ahead of closing.
And I have to say, actually, Nicole, you're pretty tenacious with this. I think slightly underplaying your role there, because actually, like you say, a couple of bits just pick up on them, but we're talking about 5 working days here by the time it comes into the business unit. And because what we're talking about is we are concerned about the safety of this child. So we can't hang around with this. And like I say, that's a maximum of 5 days. And I know that, say, within those 5 days and beyond, you are very, very tenacious with it, and you will follow up.
I thought it was interesting just to really note kind of how the process steps up along the way. Because by the time you're at stage 3 and it's coming to the business unit, it's called a resolving professional differences. We've got written a summary of the concerns. We've got really tight timescales for a response. When you're back at stage 1, this is what I would describe as what probably most people just think of their day-to-day practice. So it's having those conversations like you do all the time, where you're speaking to another agency and saying, I don't understand this decision because from my perspective, it seems like this course of action is better. Could you explain this and could we kind of iron this out together? You might not call it a resolving professional differences stage 1 and say, hello, I'd like to complete a stage 1 with you. You might not be recording it on your recording system saying I completed a stage 1 today. But it is those same principles that you follow all the way through the process, which is about that kind of open communication, wanting a response in a timely way, whether that's taking place in a multi-agency meeting or on the phone or over an email trail. Every step of the process is about focusing on getting a timely outcome that's positive for that child.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a really important point, this, isn't it? Because often, like you say, people don't think about stages 1 and 2 of the resolving professional differences protocol being resolving professional differences. Like you say, it's part of day-to-day practice. It's about having those conversations, picking up the phone, talking to somebody. In fact, sometimes you hear people say, well, if we don't resolve this, we'll have to use resolving professional differences. But like you say, that's all part of it. And that's the informal stage. But actually, for me, that forms the core of resolving professional differences. Steps 1 and 2, particularly those informal stages. Just before we move on from this, so in terms of those different steps, is somebody able to explain what's the difference between a step 1 and step 2? Who would be sort of doing what within that process?
So stage 1 would be the 2 frontline practitioners discussing with one another. And if they weren't able to resolve at this level, then they would likely speak to their team manager, who would then progress the concerns with the other team manager concerned or equivalent to try and agree a resolution and steps moving forwards.
Right, thank you. So yeah, just to clarify that, because we'll talk about themes in just a second, but I think that's one thing that we see sometimes is maybe a frontline practitioner trying to resolve things at step 1, that not working, and then that same frontline practitioner then talking to the other person's line manager, that not working, then that same person trying to progress it through. But it's important actually those steps are followed. And I think sometimes just having one step removed from that sort of direct experience can really help to resolve things. So step 1 is about practitioner to practitioner. Stage 2, ideally, is about sort of line manager to line manager. I think that's probably a good way to summarize it. Say. And then when we sort of move on to step 3, as you mentioned just a moment ago, I typically at that stage we're then sort of talking about sort of the level of sort of operations managers, I guess.
If you have those in your agency.
If you have those, yeah.
I guess within the police, that would equate to an inspector
Yep.
And in other agencies that might equate to other kind of leadership roles.
So what are the sort of themes that you see sort of when the resolving professional differences come in?
So when considering the RPD forms that we have submitted in the last year, the most common theme is around a lack of communication or support. So essentially that is where an agency has tried to get in contact with another agency, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, hasn't received a response, or the response that they are receiving isn't adequate. So this is something that has been recognised through the partnership, and we are working very hard to overcome those barriers. I think it's also important to note that if ever there are two agencies where they're not 100% sure who they should contact, then we as the business unit would be very happy to support with that. So because we've got the contacts in lots of different agencies, then if ever there is a circumstance where they're not sure who they need to be referring to, they would be very welcome to contact us ahead of the stage 3, and we would do everything we can to support them to get the right person involved, to hopefully try and resolve ahead of referring into the business unit.
So communication, first and foremost, from what you just said. And I'm getting a big nod from Nicole from across the room here. So communication is really key. Anything else that sort of tends to come up as a sort of common theme at all, or any particular agencies?
I think in terms of the agencies who are referring in, I would say it is most likely to be education settings who refer in. But over the last year or so, we have definitely noticed a much wider range of agencies who are referring in stage 3 RPDs. So I think that is very reflective of the work that we've done to really promote it across all agencies. We put it out through the Learning Bulletin, we share it on our social media, and we have really worked to kind of raise the awareness. And I think that definitely shows in the increased number that we have received in the last year, which has also continued into this year too, which is, although it's obviously not great if we are receiving them, it's better that we are receiving them so that the agencies are getting the resolutions that they want, rather than kind of sitting and not being able to achieve the desired outcome.
It's and just you talked about the promotion that we've done of the protocol over the last few years, really. And it's funny because people sometimes ask me, like, how many do you have in, and what does this look like? And I think we were worried a while back, going back a few years ago now, that actually we're getting very, very few coming into the business unit, which it's always that sort of that difficult thing, isn't it? It's like, are we not getting many through because everybody's getting on with each other and everyone's talking to each other and it's all going well? Or is it actually it's not being used? And I think the conclusion that we came to was that on the whole, it wasn't being used. And I think you might know better than me, but I think sort of over the sort of COVID lockdown period, I think we probably had about, it was a handful, I think, over several years. Whereas prior to that, we were sort of getting on average about one a month. But also, I think prior to COVID and lockdown, when we're getting about one a month, the vast majority of those, sort of 90-95%, were not appropriate. You know, the steps 1 and 2 hadn't been done, or it wasn't really an RPD, it was a complaint, which we can talk about in a moment. Whereas now, I think those numbers have really gone up in terms of how many have been submitted. But I personally see that as a real success, because actually I think, and again, Nicole, you know better than I will, that actually those that are coming through, the vast majority of them now are appropriate.
Yeah, certainly when I first came into my role, then most of the RPD forms that were being received weren't appropriate, and we were having to go back to the referring agency, but also where possible, kind of trying to support with the facilitation of discussion with the team managers, and kind of provide that appropriate advice to the referrer. But certainly over the last couple of years, we've definitely noticed that there are much more appropriate referrals being made, which again supports that people do have a better awareness of the process and are using it effectively.
So what sort of things, when it comes into you, obviously you've talked about wanting to see that steps 1 and 2 have been covered first and foremost. What other things? What are your kind of eyes instantly drawn to of I need to make sure we've got these things covered in it?
I think for me, it's about really being able to summarize in just a few words or one sentence, what is the outcome we want to see for this child, or what is the specific two different perspectives between the two agencies. Because sometimes you can get quite long RPD forms that have a range of concerns. They might be going back years into the child's history and experiences, and also might be kind of wrapped around what probably is a complaint. So it's more about concern about the kind of individual practice or the service that's being delivered from that agency, rather than a disagreement about the plan for the child. So a brilliant and really useful RPD form is one that really clearly summarises what the specific issue that they're looking to escalate is.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And as Nicole mentioned, once they've been received, once they've been logged and everything else, it comes to Jasmine or myself to kind of review and make decisions on. And I agree. I think sometimes there's a concern from people to think, I've got to put absolutely everything into this. And like I say, sometimes they go back years and pages and pages long. Actually, what we need to see, like I say, is that really clear picture. You need to be able to read the summary within that and say, okay, I understand it. I can see what the concern is, what is felt needs to happen, and what's been done so far to resolve that. And I think for me, that's a real key bit, is those kind of key points, and just being able to understand it very, very clearly. Because like I say, I think there's a risk if we put too much in there, you lose the wood for the trees, don't you? And it becomes quite convoluted about, is it a complaint? Is it a safeguarding concern? Who's doing what? And I think the other thing, just to add in as well, is that something I see sometimes are people referring to other people, and you have no idea who that is. I spoke to James, who spoke to Steve, who spoke to Mark, and you think, I don't know if that's a child, a parent, another agency, anything. So I think that's the other thing I'd say, is just being really clear about who's what.
I think the other thing I was going to add that I find very helpful when they do come in is evidence to support the steps and where they have been followed. So, for example, if there was an email trail or exactly who that person is, to ensure that they have contacted the right person in the right agency in the first instance before stepping up to the stage 3.
So, and we sort of talked a little bit about themes there. Part of the role of the business unit is to help to broker that resolution at step 3. But we've kind of talked about themes, and I think it's important for people to understand actually the wider picture around RPDs, particularly around when we identify themes. I'm just wondering, Jasmine, would you be able to sort of talk about that sort of bigger picture in terms of resolving professional differences and those themes that we pick out, and what happens with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So every year, Nicole does a deep dive into all of the RPD forms that we've received throughout the year, and she will then analyse kind of any recurring themes across those, anything that the partnership need to really grasp hold of and take further action on. And then that gets presented to our quality and performance subgroup, which is a strategic group which has representatives from different agencies on there who all come together, really look at the learning from that year of RPD and consider what we need to do to try and reduce the likelihood of these kinds of RPDs coming up again. So
it's that sort of systemic change as well as the kind of direct operational sort of change that people are wanting to see when they're submitting the RPD. I think that's really important, because it is important to look, particularly as the partnership, systemically about that improvements that can be made. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's not an easy task, is it? This isn't easy, straightforward work. RPD can be challenging. So in the spirit of that, I do have a bit of a game for you, if you'd like, Steve. Here we go. Go, come on then. Well, game might be a little bit strong, but it's more like, when you used to like write into a newspaper column asking for advice. Am I your agony uncle? Yes. For an RPD? I've got some common challenges with RPD. Because sometimes it isn't an easy and straightforward process, and people do encounter challenges. So I'm thinking, if I give you some of these common challenges, and you can advise what you'd suggest in those scenarios. Okay, I'm being put on the spot here. You go for it. Okay, right. So the first one. Dear Steve, I want to progress to an RPD, stage 2,
but I don't know who the practitioner's manager is.
So the first advice that I would give is to ask the question. I think it does come up. I have that in training where people say to me, it's fine, but how do we know who Joe Bloggs is line manager? And I always say, first and foremost, just ask the question. Simple as that. It doesn't have to be in a confrontational sort of way. Again, it's just about good communication. And I think what I always say to people is, if you don't know, if you're having that conversation, if you feel like, actually, I'm still not happy that we found a resolution here, I'm still concerned about this child, actually just say to somebody, look, I feel like we've reached a point. I don't feel like we can resolve things here today. I do still have these concerns. I'm going to have to take them back and talk to my line manager and ask them to have a conversation with your line manager and see if they can resolve things amongst themselves. Can I just ask for their contact details so they can get a hold of them? Simple as that. So first and foremost, just ask. And I think, as Nicole just mentioned, though, if for whatever reason that's not an option, then you can always contact us and we can do some digging across the partnership agencies and try and find some contacts for you. But I think something that I would always want to stress about the RPD process is, in terms of the role of the business unit, it's not about bypassing good communication. It's not about bypassing relationships. We know the best safeguarding practice comes about from good professional working relationships. And actually, like with families we work with, like with ourselves, what we want a lot of the time is just being people to be open and transparent with us and just asking those questions. So, first and foremost, just ask.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, thank you. So then the second one, Dear Steve, I've tried to complete stage 2 of the RPD, but I haven't got a reply. So I haven't actually completed it. What should I do?
So yeah, this is something like, Nicole, like you mentioned a moment, it's sort of coming in more and more commonly to us, I think, at the moment, and we have been picking up as a theme. And I think, firstly, I'd want to be seeing what does that look like? And is that somebody's literally tried to make one phone call, it's not been answered, they've left a voicemail and haven't heard anything back? Also, I'll be looking at timescales around this. Are we talking about this, somebody that's tried to make repeat contact with somebody over a period of time and not getting any responses? And I think when they come into us, I think we've seen both, really. I think you've seen sometimes somebody has literally just sent an email and a few days later not had anything back. Other times you can see somebody's been really tenacious and really tried, and they've tried every avenue they can, and they've tried phone calls and emails and not getting through. So part of it depends on that for me, and it's something I'd want to be looking at. But also, I think the other thing we need to consider is about the severity of the concern and the fact that sometimes we can't just hang around, or we can't just say, okay, well, try a bit more. Because if we're talking about really, really serious safeguarding concerns, we've got to put the needs of the child first. So I think that would be part of that strong part of that decision making, is how urgent is this matter here. So I'd say if it didn't sort of strike us as very, very, very urgent, if we couldn't see there been real attempts to try and contact somebody, we would. I think I'd probably want to have a look at who they've been trying to contact, and actually, is it the right person? Like Nicole said, sometimes somebody might be trying to contact somebody who's either the wrong person or may have left post and they didn't know that, or they're off on long-term sick. You get sometimes, or for a sick period, and so they're not responding to emails. So we'd want to try and assist with that and try and make sure they are contacting the right person. Are they kind of actually being tenacious with that? But also sometimes we have had to sort of look at it and say, well, okay, well, I guess two things is, by not having that response, is that increasing the risk to that child? And sometimes it does. So we would progress it through as an RPD. Sometimes it doesn't, but we can see actually this might be a bit frustrating. So I think what we can do and what we have done sometimes, and I'm going to look to Nicole here, is actually just write to that person, to that team leader, for example, to say, look, we've had this come in. We just don't want to basically kind of have this resolved at step 2. Can you make contact with them? So it's still part of that inform, but we're trying to assist that, I guess.
Yeah, and I think we even had an example of this the other day where one had come in and it wasn't quite at stage 3. But in the interest of trying to resolve it as quickly as possible, I had a phone call with the team manager, who then spoke with the frontline practitioner. And in the end, it was resolved in the same day, which is obviously great. And it achieved the outcome that was desired by the other agency concerned.
Yeah. And I think you raised a really important point there, Steve, as well, about severity of concern, that actually the resolving professional differences process isn't appropriate to use if a child is at immediate risk of harm. That's about calling 999, picking up the phone and speaking to the front door in children's social care or whatever that might require. So it's, as a nature of the process and the timescales that are set out in the protocol, it's more suited to non-urgent kind of differences of perspective.
Definitely.
Okay, I've got the third one.
Here we go. I feel like I'm in my job interview all over again.
So number 3, dear Steve, I'm not sure if this is an RPD or not. I actually agree with the plan for the child, but the practice is making it difficult for me to support the family. For instance, I've been chasing this practitioner for some information about the child for 3 weeks and I've had no reply. What should I do?
In a way, I'm going to say this is an easy one. I think, again, this is something we see coming in. And the key part there that you said was right at the start is actually there is a plan in place and I agree with the plan to keep this child safe. And that is ultimately what we're looking at for the RPDs. Is the plan in place there and does that protect that child? So that's the first and foremost bit. So in that instance, yes, there's a plan. Yes, it's agreed with. So I wouldn't say it's an RPD. I think if it's in terms of practice, if it's in terms of kind of the linking in, knowing what's going on, who's doing what, I would say that's much more around the complaint side of things. And every agency has a complaints procedure. Again, there's an informal part of that. So I would look to resolve that as for that practitioner to resolve that as a complaint rather than RPD. Because like you say, with RPDs, it's about we are concerned around safeguarding a child, an action is or isn't being taken to safeguard that child effectively. And that's the bit we ultimately always need to focus down on. Did I pass?
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. That was really helpful.
Lucky me. And I think, Nicole, is there anything in that we've just sort of talked through that in terms of sort of good practice examples, is there anything that you'd want to add to that at all?
I think in terms of kind of the practice that we have received, we did share a survey in winter 2023, which was completed by quite a wide range of practitioners. And although not all of the feedback is positive, there was largely a lot of positive feedback about the RPD process. So, for example, some of the quotes included things like it resulted in improved care planning for the child, that it's brilliant in giving opportunities for agencies to share concerns in an open, transparent manner, which leads to better relationships and outcomes for the children. And one of the other comments is specifically around improved communication between health and children's social care, and that it helped put together a comprehensive, robust plan within a set time frame. And it also put together a contingency plan that if things deteriorated within that time frame, there was a plan for next steps. So I think that's really positive in kind of supporting relationships between agencies and resolving the difference between the agencies to improve the relationships and improve the outcomes for the children.
Again, it's something that I see quite a lot around resolving professional differences protocols is on the whole, people don't like conflict. They don't like kind of raising concerns. They don't like, potentially the idea of having to challenge somebody else or falling out with another agency. Whereas actually, like you say, when there's good resolving professional differences, when there's good maturity within the partnership, actually that really strengthens that understanding between agencies and those relationships. I think something we see coming up sometimes as well is just a misunderstanding about what another agency does or what their service offers or the legal framework that they work within. You might have somebody, for example, saying, I'm concerned about this child. I think children's social care, so social workers should go around there and kick in the front door and remove this child immediately. Not understanding sometimes actually the legal framework around that a social worker can't just turn up at somebody's house and kick in the front door. So yeah, for me, it's about developing those understandings between agencies as well, because that's when you get, again, the good practice taking place. So I'm just thinking, you mentioned health services there. You mentioned children's social care there as well. I think something that I've certainly seen over the years, particularly early on, is that originally, the Resolving Professional Differences Protocol used to be a local authority document before the days of the partnership. It has become a partnership document several years ago now. And a question that I'm often asked as well is, who are RPDs normally sort of raised about? And I have to be honest that the majority that we see do tend to be around children's social care and actions there. But I always caveat that, because I think for me, that's probably be more about the traditional use of RPDs and the way that it's been seen in terms of this is something to challenge children's social care about. So, Jasmine, I know we've been doing lots of work across the partnership to kind of trying to broaden that perspective out about the RPDs. Would you be able to talk about that at all?
I mean, there's no reason why all RPDs should be against the council or children's social care. There's, clear reasons why an agency might disagree with the direction of a police investigation or the health planning or the health support in place for a child, or something in relation to a child's timetable or education support that relates to safeguarding as well. So in terms of really opening that up, what we're trying to do in kind of the messaging that we're giving out from the partnership is that there are all these scenarios that it can be used. And what we want to see is it being used in all scenarios where agencies or professionals are not agreeing about the plan for a child, where it's connected to that child's safety and the safeguarding in place.
No, definitely. Thank you. And I think the other theme that we sort of picked out from doing this work across the wider partnership as well is quite often people saying, oh, we use it all the time. We've got loads of it. We're resolving things at step 1 and 2, stage 1 and 2 all the time. But I know that's been quite a challenge for us as a business unit, isn't it? About actually how do we capture that? Because obviously only when it comes in at step 3 that we kind of record it and log it. I'm not sure if we've got any solution to that at this stage. Because like you said right at the start, a lot of it is that very informal, picking up the phone and having a conversation with somebody.
Absolutely. It's a challenge to know how many stage 1 RPDs are being done every day in Somerset, because actually, if we started saying to everyone, well, you need to fill out this form to say you've done a stage 1 RPD and submit it to us, then actually it's not very informal anymore, is it?
I probably wouldn't do it if I'm honest.
But we'd love to hear from you. If you in your agency are seeing particular themes or trends across your stage 1 or stage 2 RPDs and you think that there's learning for the partnership, please do email in or fill in the form on our website, because if there's anything that we can do to help our development as a partnership, anything you can share with us, we'd love to hear that and be able to take action on it.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'm conscious we've talked about stages 1, 2 and 3 here, but there is a 4th step to resolve professional differences protocol, which I think is really important as well. Are you able to kind of explain that at all?
Yeah, of course. So stage 4 would be the executive response. So if the difference is still unable to be received between senior organisational leads, in exceptional circumstances, either agency can request for the matter to be referred to the SSCP executive for a final decision. So at this point, it would be considered, and that would be the absolute final step. There would be no opportunity for further challenge following on from that. However, we usually do manage to resolve ahead of stage 4, so it's not something that we've really had to utilise too much in the past.
Yeah, I think it's a good sign that it's not a step that we have to resort to very often, and it shows the success that we are able to have at stage 3 of the process in terms of resolving things for children in a timely way. Just for anyone who wasn't aware, the executive of the SSCP, there are leaders. They lead the partnership, and it's a rep from the council, from the Integrated Care Board, from the police and from education who come together and steer our partnership. So if we're taking it to our leadership, we're saying, we've tried to resolve this on every level. We haven't been successful. We need kind of a final decision from you on this.
If anybody wants to find out more about the exec, we have previously recorded an episode with Claire Winter, who's the executive member from the local authority, and with Dickon Turner, who was previously, before he's moved on to new pastures, the executive member from the police as well. So if you want to sort of find out a bit more about that role and what that looks like, then do go back and have a listen to those episodes as well. But just picking up on that, and we say we sort of hardly ever. I think to my knowledge, we've never had to formally go to stage 4 of the RPD. And I know I've been challenged on this a couple of times before, but actually when we've looked at it, it's not actually followed the process. It's not come through the business unit. It's not followed steps 1, 2, or 3. Sometimes people have just emailed a member of the executive directly and sort of said, well, I've stepped it straight up to stage 4 here. So we're sort of talking about progressing through the Resolving Professional Differences protocol, going through those steps. I believe, and jump in if I'm incorrect here, but I don't think we've ever had to kind of formally escalate anything to step 4.
No, we haven't.
Is there anything else either of you wanted sort of any key messages you'd want to get across to anybody or anything?
Not that I can think of. We've dug in deep to RPDs today. It's been a great discussion.
Great stuff. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Now, if anybody wants to find out more or wants to know where you can get hold of this RPD that we've been talking about for the last 40 minutes or so, you can find that, of course, on the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership website. If you look at protocols, it's in there, but I'll also put a link to that in the episode description for today's podcast. And do take a moment to have a look, read through the protocol, become familiar with it, because it's really important that you are aware of it, and even more importantly, that you actually use it. Because I think one thing that we do see fairly frequently, Jasmine mentioned right at the start there about reviews, is that there are disagreements at times, but those don't get resolved. And sometimes as a result of that, sadly, children have been harmed. So that's what it's there for. Do please use it. And I say all agencies are really open to using that framework to resolve things when we're talking about safeguarding of children. So, Jasmine, Nicole, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us on your podcast.
Great stuff. Well, take care, and we will speak again soon. Bye-bye. As always, if you'd like to find out more details on the topics discussed in today's episode, go to the SSCP website at somersetsafeguardingchildren.org.uk or by following any of the links in this episode's description. And in particular, if you'd like to find the Resolving Professional Differences protocol, just go to the website and hover up where it says resources in the top right-hand corner of the screen next to the big red button, and you'll find the Resolving Professional Differences protocol will just magically appear for you on the screen. Now, if you enjoyed listening to the ThePPod, we'd really appreciate it if you took that bit of time to follow or subscribe to us on your chosen platform, or better still, leave a review to let other people know about it, and make sure to let your colleagues know about the podcast and encourage them to join us here as well. It really does help to spread the word. Now, if you have any questions or comments arising from today's episode, or would like to be involved in future episodes, we'd love you to get in touch with us at theppod@somerset.gov.uk. Once again, I'd like to give a huge thank you to my guests today, Jasmine Wark and Nicole Wooldridge, my colleagues from the SSCP Business Unit. And as always, I'd like to thank you for listening. My name is Steve Maccabee, and I'm the training manager for the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership. And I look forward to you joining us again next time at the ThePPod.
Let's work together to help keep children safe.